The morning sun glinted off the polished marble steps of the Franklin County Courthouse as Elijah Crawford adjusted his crimson tie. At 42, with 15 years as a prosecutor and now 3 as state attorney, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Today marked the beginning of the Rodriguez trial, a high-profile corruption case involving 3 police officers accused of evidence tampering and racial discrimination. Elijah checked his watch, 8:15 a.m. Perfect timing. He took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp autumn air. The weight of his leather briefcase felt reassuring against his palm. Inside were months of meticulous preparation, witness statements, and evidence that would finally bring justice to dozens of wrongfully accused citizens. "You ready for this?" texted Naomi, his chief assistant. "Born ready," Elijah replied, tucking his phone away. As he climbed the courthouse steps, several reporters called out his name. Elijah nodded politely but kept moving. Media attention wasn't new to him. Being one of the youngest black state attorneys in the region meant perpetual scrutiny. He'd learned long ago that his work, not sound bites, would define his legacy. Little did he know that before he could even reach the courtroom, he would face a battle of his own. The security checkpoint at the courthouse entrance buzzed with activity as Elijah approached. He placed his briefcase on the conveyor belt, removed his watch, and waited his turn. Despite being a regular presence here, today seemed different. 2 men in dark suits stood to the side, observing everyone with calculated precision. "Sir, step aside please," said the taller agent, flashing his badge. "FBI. I'm Agent Marcus Reed, this is Agent Thomas Cooper." Elijah raised an eyebrow but complied. "Is there a problem?" Agent Cooper, stocky with cold gray eyes, stepped forward. "We need to verify your business here today. This courthouse is handling sensitive federal matters." "I'm well aware," Elijah replied calmly. "I'm here for the Rodriguez case." Reed exchanged glances with Cooper. "And your connection to this case would be?" "I'm prosecuting it," Elijah stated simply. Cooper scoffed. "Right. And I'm the Attorney General. Look, sir, we've been monitoring individuals entering the building today. Your profile matches someone of interest." Elijah's jaw tightened. "My profile? And what exactly would that profile be, Agent Cooper?" "Sir, we're just doing our job," Reed interjected, stepping closer. "If you could provide some identification and explain your actual purpose here, we can all move on." Around them, other courthouse visitors, mostly white, passed through security without a second glance. A few glanced curiously at the confrontation unfolding. "My ID is in my jacket pocket," Elijah said evenly. "May I reach for it?" Slowly, Cooper commanded, his hand instinctively shifting toward his holster. Elijah noticed the motion but kept his expression neutral as he carefully reached inside his suit jacket, the weight of their assumptions pressing heavier than any physical burden ever could. Elijah handed over his driver's license, but Agent Cooper barely glanced at it before continuing his interrogation. "So you claim to be a prosecutor on the Rodriguez case," Cooper said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Funny, I was briefed on all key personnel this morning. Don't recall seeing your name anywhere." "Check the court docket," Elijah replied firmly. "State of Franklin versus Rodriguez, Diaz, and Hoffman. I'm listed as lead prosecutor." Reed stepped closer, towering over Elijah. "Listen, we've had concerns about outside agitators attempting to disrupt these proceedings. Several protesters were planning to infiltrate the courthouse today." "I'm not a protester," Elijah said, keeping his voice measured despite the growing audience of curious onlookers. "I've been state attorney for 3 years." Cooper laughed sharply. "State attorney? Look, buddy, we don't have time for games. What's really in that briefcase?" "Case files, as I explained." Reed grabbed the briefcase from the security belt. "We'll need to inspect this thoroughly." "That contains confidential case information," Elijah protested, reaching for his property. "Sir." Back up now. Cooper barked, his hand again moving toward his weapon. Consider this a security screening. A security guard shifted uncomfortably nearby as Reed began rummaging through Elijah's meticulously organized documents. These could be forged, Cooper muttered, though the official state seals and letterheads were clearly visible. Elijah felt his pulse quicken, but kept his exterior calm. Years of facing juries had taught him that showing emotion could be weaponized against him, especially for a black man in a position of power. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Elijah stated, his voice resonating through the now hushed lobby. The tension in the lobby was abruptly broken by an authoritative voice calling from across the security area. "Mr. Crawford. There you are. We're about to begin pre-trial conference in courtroom B." Heads turned to see Judge Patricia Winters approaching with her clerk. The distinguished judge's presence commanded immediate respect, her silver-streaked hair framing a face that had presided over thousands of cases. "Judge Winters," Elijah nodded respectfully. "I was just having a discussion with these FBI agents." The judge's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. "Gentlemen, is there a problem with our state attorney?" Agent Reed's expression shifted instantly. "State attorney?" From behind the security desk, Courtney Jenkins, the veteran security supervisor who had worked at the courthouse for over 20 years, stepped forward. "Mr. Crawford prosecuted my nephew's assault case last year," she explained to the agents. "He's been state attorney since 2022. I see him nearly every week." The court clerk, Michael Patel, added firmly, "I've prepared his documentation for today's proceedings personally. Those are official files you're handling." Cooper looked from the judge to the clerk, then back to Elijah, his confident demeanor crumbling. Reed quickly began gathering the scattered papers, shoving them back into the briefcase. Judge Winters glanced at her watch. "We're on a schedule, gentlemen. Mr. Crawford is expected in my courtroom in 15 minutes. I suggest you conclude whatever this is promptly." Elijah straightened his tie and reclaimed his composure. The moment had come to address the situation directly. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his position, "I am Elijah Crawford, State Attorney for Franklin County. I've been prosecuting cases in this courthouse for 15 years. He reached into his inside pocket and produced his official state attorney badge and credentials. "My office is on the 3rd floor. My name is on the door. My picture hangs in the main hall alongside every state attorney who has served since 1950. I'm due in Judge Winters' courtroom to prosecute 3 officers for civil rights violations and evidence tampering." The credentials gleamed under the lobby lights. Reed's face flushed red while Cooper stared at the floor. "Now," Elijah continued, voice steady, "I need my briefcase back intact, and an explanation for why I was singled out among dozens of people entering this building today." Several courthouse employees had gathered nearby, including bailiffs and administrative staff who worked with Elijah regularly. Their presence formed a silent wall of support. "We apologize for the misunderstanding, Mr. Crawford," Reed mumbled, hurriedly returning the briefcase. "That's State Attorney Crawford," Judge Winters corrected sharply. "And this isn't a misunderstanding. This is profiling, happening in my courthouse." The power dynamic had shifted completely. The agents who moments ago towered with authority now seemed to shrink under the collective gaze of courthouse staff. Elijah Crawford took a measured breath. In this moment, he had choices: righteous anger, public humiliation of the agents, or something more deliberate. As a prosecutor, he'd learned that how justice was pursued mattered as much as justice itself. "Agents Reed and Cooper," Elijah began, his voice calm but resonant, "I understand you're doing your job protecting this courthouse. Security is paramount, especially during high-profile cases." He adjusted his cufflinks, a gift from his father upon passing the bar exam. "However, what happened here goes beyond standard security protocol. You made assumptions based on appearance rather than procedure. Had you simply asked for identification initially, as you do with everyone else, this situation wouldn't have escalated. Judge Winters nodded approvingly as Elijah continued. I won't be filing a formal complaint today. Instead, I'm inviting both of you to observe the Rodriguez trial. It's about police officers who let assumptions guide their actions instead of proper procedure. The parallel might be educational. The courthouse clock chimed 9:15. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have justice to pursue on behalf of the people of Franklin County. Several staff members nodded respectfully as Elijah gathered his belongings. Mr. Crawford, Agent Reed called out, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. I apologize. That was unprofessional of us. Elijah paused momentarily. Apology accepted, Agent Reed. Growth comes from acknowledging mistakes, not denying them. I hope to see you both in the courtroom, this time, following proper protocol. With that, Elijah walked toward the elevators, shoulders squared, neither diminished nor defined by what had just occurred. The courthouse buzzed with whispers as news of the confrontation spread. By lunch recess, both Reed and Cooper had slipped into the back of courtroom B, watching Elijah methodically present the prosecution's opening statement, a powerful indictment of systemic bias in law enforcement. Afterward, Agent Reed approached Elijah outside the courtroom. Your case. It's making me reconsider some things, he admitted quietly. Cooper nodded silently beside his partner, his earlier arrogance replaced by thoughtful reflection. The courthouse security implemented new protocols that same week. Identification checks would now be standardized for everyone, regardless of appearance. And when Elijah won the Rodriguez case 2 weeks later, securing justice for dozens of wrongfully targeted individuals, 2 FBI agents were spotted in the gallery, listening intently to every word of his closing argument. Sometimes, justice worked in unexpected ways.